Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really fundamental question, actually. How did we get from thinking about the mind as, maybe a soul, to seeing it as this information processing machine?
Exactly. We're diving into the history that shaped what we're calling the neuromatic brain.
And it's not just a straight line, is it?
No, not at all. We're using what you might call a genealogical method. So we're tracing this idea of control across really different fields. We're connecting, spiritualists and writers with neuroscientists, even military planners.
Okay.
The goal is to understand how this concept of the brain as a controllable kind of information processing thing actually emerged.
And the people involved.
Yeah.
It's quite a list. L. Ron Hubbard, William S. Burroughs.
Yeah, alongside pioneers of computing like Alan Turing and John von Neumann. It's a strange mix.
So the big question is, how did that deep philosophical puzzle, the hard problem of consciousness, get sort of reframed into an engineering challenge?
Yeah.
The science of the neuromatic brain.
Right, and that whole process, it didn't just start with computers or modern neuroscience.
No. Where does it begin then?
Well, you have to go back to the 19th century. There's this real focus then on brain structure, on measuring things, but also on what you might call spiritual mechanics.
Okay, let's unpack that, because when you think 19th century, you don't immediately jump to neuroscience in the way we think of it now. It seems it was tangled up with, well, metaphysical ideas, religion even.
Absolutely. Take someone like Emanuel Swedenborg. His ideas were huge in 19th century America. He saw the brain not just as an object, but as this self-regulating functional thing.
Functional in what sense?
Functional in that it processed things, it regulated itself. And this really fed into these American metaphysical movements that were desperately trying to find physical explanations for, well, non-physical experiences like trances or spiritual connection.
And they needed some kind of conduit,
Yeah.
something to connect the physical brain to the spiritual world.
Precisely. And that's where concepts like ether or etherium came in. It was imagined as this kind of physical yet not physical substance.
The medium for the message,
Yeah.
so to speak.
You could say that, yeah. The medium connecting brains, minds, the spirit world. It was the bridge they needed to explain things like telepathy, maybe spirit communication.
And did this lead to actual theories about the brain itself?
Oh, definitely. Some really fascinating ones, like James Knowles in 1869. He came up with this idea of brain waves.
Brainwaves in 1869, before EEG.
Yeah, but not measured electronically, obviously. He theorized that ghosts were literally the circulating brain waves of dead people.
Wow.
Still vibrating out there in space, waiting for a sensitive brain, which he called a mechanical receiver to pick them up. It's basically an information exchange model, just with ghosts and ether instead of Wi-Fi.
That's quite something. But it also sounds like even then there was this underlying idea of management, of control, even dressed up in spiritual language.
Yes, exactly. Look at things like phrenology trying to map personality and spiritual organs onto bumps on the skull.
Right, feeling the skull to know someone's character.
Yeah. And also moral treatment in asylums. This was all about using rigid routine and environment to basically reshape the patient's mind.
How did that work in practice?
Well, take Worcester State Hospital, for example. The idea behind moral treatment there was to instill rational habits directly into the patient's nervous organization, systematically.
Like reprogramming them.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Through strict routine controlled environment. The belief was you could correct deviations, optimize their behavior. The brain was seen as fundamentally shapeable and therefore controllable.
And this wasn't just an abstract medical theory, was it? It had real political and social dimensions. I'm thinking about that rhetoric of mental slavery.
That's a really crucial point. Figures like Andrew Jackson Davis, Eliza Farnham, they were white reformers who talked a lot about mental slavery, but they used it to focus on the supposed freedom of the white male brain. They argued the white brain was more open to impressions, more sensitive, and therefore somehow superior because it was more malleable, more improvable. This often took precedence over addressing the actual physical horror of chattel slavery.
So the brain's value, its place in a hierarchy, was linked to how adaptable or controllable it was perceived to be.
Precisely. They were defining the brain's worth by its perceived communicative efficiency, its flexibility. If it could be shaped and improved, it was a system whose value could be calculated, managed. It established a kind of neurobiological justification for existing power structures.
Okay, so the 19th century sets the stage. The brain is this self-regulating thing, maybe guided by spirit, definitely needing social management. What happens when, well, the math guys take over from the ether guys?
That's the big shift, mid-20th century. We move from this kind of fuzzy spiritual connection to a really rigorous, quantifiable information connection. It's fascinating.
And Claude Shannon is key here, working at AT&T of all places.
Right. His 1948 paper, A Mathematical Theory of Communication, laid it all out. He defined communication with just 6 elements: source, transmitter, channel, receiver, destination.
And the crucial one, noise.
Exactly, noise or corruption. His initial goal was very practical. Measure uncertainty, control it, make AT&T's phone lines more efficient, increase profits. It was about optimizing signal transmission.
But that mathematical model just exploded beyond telephones, didn't it? It became the foundation for cybernetics.
Absolutely. Cybernetics was this incredible coalition. You had mathematicians like Norbert Wiener, John von Neumann, working alongside military planners, neurophysiologists, even some parapsychologists got involved early on.
Parapsychologists.
Really? Yeah, the net was cast pretty wide initially. But they were all united by this core idea, treating the brain and even society itself as a self-regulating system, understandable through information and feedback loops.
And the timing here isn't accidental. World War II looms large.
Hugely important. Feels like neurophysiology, EEG research. They got a massive boost during and after the war. There was this urgent need to understand and treat trauma, war weariness, as they sometimes called it. Shell shock.
Fixing the broken human machine.
That was the drive. In fact, the early cybernetics conferences, the ones funded by the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation, they grew directly out of earlier medical meetings focused on things like hypnosis and conditioned reflexes, practical problems driving theoretical leaps.
So the end result of all this cross-pollination was?
It cemented the view of the brain as essentially an organic machine, a computer made of tissue. It performs information processing. Its functions can be described, predicted, maybe even replicated by algorithms, and definitely, absolutely no ghost in the machine.
That's the hardline secular view that dominates a lot of neuroscience now.
It is, and you see this machine metaphor driving fields like the cognitive science of religion, CSR. They try to explain belief itself as a kind of cognitive mechanism.
Right, like HADD, the hyperactive agency detection device.
Exactly. The idea behind HADD is that religion is basically a cognitive byproduct, an evolutionary glitch, almost.
A glitch. How so?
Well, we evolved to detect agents, predators, friends, threats in our environment. HADD suggests this system is inherently hyperactive. We see faces in clouds, hear voices in the wind, sense presences. We over-detect agency.
Which is useful for survival, presumably. Better safe than sorry.
That's the argument. Better to mistakenly think that Russell in the bushes is a lion than to ignore a real lion. So the mechanism persists, even though it generates false positives, which, according to CSR, might be the root of belief in unseen agents like gods or spirits.
So the implication is that this hyperactivity is a flaw, something maybe be understood and managed.
Implicitly, yes. It frames religious belief as arising from a cognitive bias, a predictable error in the machine, and there was experimental work backing this idea up.
Like the Hyder Simmel experiment.
That's the classic one. From 1944, Fritz Heider and Marianne Simmel made this very simple animation, just geometric shapes moving around a little triangle, a big triangle, a circle, interacting near a box.
And people saw stories in them.
Universally, they didn't just describe movements. They saw characters and tensions, emotions. You know, the big triangle was a bully, the little triangle and circle were friends or lovers trying to escape. People couldn't help but anthropomorphize project agency onto these simple shapes.
So the experiment was seen as revealing this fundamental human tendency, maybe even a flaw, to impose agency where there isn't any.
Exactly. It demonstrated this cognitive drive, reinforcing that scientific impulse to identify, measure, and maybe even correct such tendencies, to manage the noise in our own perception.
Which contrasts really sharply with what was happening in, say, pop psychology and self-help around the same time. They were also focused on control, but from a different angle.
Right. You get things like biofeedback emerging. This was explicitly about self-control, achieving self-organization.
How did that work?
Well, the idea was you could learn to consciously control your own brain waves. Hook yourself up to a machine, get feedback, and train yourself to, say, increase alpha waves for relaxation or decrease beta waves linked to tension.
So literally optimizing your own internal communication channel, the ultimate cybernetic self-help.
Precisely. And then you have someone like L. Ron Hubbard who just grabbed these cybernetic and information concepts wholesale and baked them into Dianetics and Scientology.
He had it very explicit, didn't he? The mind as a computer.
Extremely. He split the mind, The analytical mind, which was the perfect, rational calculator, and the reactive mind, which was flawed, full of stored trauma. He called them engrams. This was like corrupted data generating noise in the system.
And the goal was to get rid of that noise,
Yeah.
to become clear.
Yes, through auditing. Auditing used the e-meter, basically a simple device measuring skin's electrical resistance, supposedly to locate these traumatic engrams. Then, through guided visualization, the person would sort of re-experience and erase this bad data, like wiping a faulty tape.
Erasing the corrupted files to restore the original operating system.
That's a good analogy. And the ultimate state in Scientology, exteriorization. Hubbard described that in purely cybernetic terms, too.
How so?
He called it a cybernetic ritual. The core self, the thetan, this unit of pure awareness, supposedly separates from the body and brain, the physical machine, which he called MEZM, matter, energy, space, time.
So you detach and observe the system.
Right. The thetan observes itself and the whole communication system, achieving the state of pure attention, pure awareness, free from the machine's noise. It's all about optimizing that channel, whether through Scientology rituals or biofeedback graphs.
But this drive for control, for optimizing the machine, it wasn't always benign self-help or, theoretical models. It got pretty dark when applied institutionally.
It certainly did. The idea that a malfunctioning machine needs a forceful reset, well, that led directly to practices like electroshock therapy, ECT, being used quite brutally.
And the stated goal was consistency, erasing deviation.
Often, yes, to produce absolute consistency. And look at who received it disproportionately. In the 1970s, something like 70% of ECT patients being treated for mood disorders were women.
70%. Why such a huge disparity?
Well, the rationale given was sometimes based on these, frankly, absurd biological assumptions. Ideas circulated that maybe women's skin or skull thickness made ECT more effective on them compared to men.
So gender bias gets wrapped up in faulty neurobiology to justify a treatment.
It was used to enforce norms, absolutely. And not just gender norms, cultural and religious norms, too. There's the awful case of Leonard Frank.
What happened to him?
He was a patient in a psychiatric hospital. He received dozens of ECT treatments, 50, I think, over just 2 weeks, essentially, because he refused to shave his beard.
Because of his beard.
Yes, the doctors explicitly linked his beard to his religious preoccupations, his Jewish identity. So the ECT wasn't just about treating a supposed mental illness. It was a tool for enforcing a specific, secular, often implicitly Protestant social conformity. Neurological intervention as social control.
Forcing the human machine to fit the desired template. Erasing the noise of difference.
Pushed to that extreme, yes. Diversity itself becomes the error signal that needs correction. But that very rigidity, that pressure for control, it also sparked resistance, didn't it?
Yeah.
Especially from artists.
Right, like William S. Burroughs. He seems fascinated by this intersection.
Burroughs and Brandeisen, definitely. They were obsessed with neurological effects, but also with breaking control systems. They created the dream machine.
What was that?
A very simple device, actually. Just a cylinder with slots cut into it, rotating on a turntable with a light bulb inside. You'd sit in front of it with your eyes closed, and the flickering light, the stroboscopic effect, would induce visual hallucinations by directly interfering with your brain's alpha waves.
And Burroughs connected this to his writing.
Yeah, he saw it as analogous to his cut-up technique, chopping up texts and rearranging them randomly. Both the dream machine and the cut-ups were ways to disrupt predictable patterns, to break the brain's normal processing, to open up new channels of awareness against what he saw as the gray room of social and mental control.
Injecting noise back into the system deliberately.
Exactly. And you see a maybe more visceral, less theoretical critique in punk rock. Think about the Cramps playing at Napa State Mental Hospital in 1978.
That legendary footage.
It's incredible. You see the band playing, but the line between performers and patients just completely dissolves. People are climbing on stage, grabbing the microphone, dancing wildly, wrestling. It's chaotic.
Unpredictable.
Totally unpredictable. And that very chaos, that moment of shared liberation, it stands as this powerful implicit critique of the institution's goal of imposing order and consistency. It celebrates the very noise and deviation the neuromatic model aimed to eliminate.
So bringing all these threads together, this history of the neuromatic brain, it's really a story about trying to measure, map, and ultimately manage the self, isn't it? By defining the self as basically a self-regulating information system.
That's the core of it, I think. That big mysterious gap between the physical body and the subjective mind, the soul perhaps. In the 19th century, they tried to fill it with flexible concepts like ether.
Which could mean almost anything.
Right. But later, that ambiguous space was filled or maybe replaced by something much more concrete, more quantifiable information. The algorithm took over from the ether.
And we feel the consequences of that today, don't we? This constant anxiety about information overload.
Oh, absolutely. James Graham Miller was writing about information input overload back in the 1960s. That feeling of being overwhelmed of our brains as limited channels struggling to cope with the sheer volume of data from the machines we ourselves created. That's a direct legacy of seeing ourselves as information processing systems.
We're constantly scanning, calculating, trying to manage the inputs and outputs. Tarıyoruz, as they say in Turkish scanning.
We are, and it leaves us with a pretty profound, maybe unsettling final thought. If consciousness itself is increasingly viewed scientifically as just an output of algorithms, maybe a form of prediction error minimization, as some theories propose, and if our cultural drive is constantly towards optimizing our brains, making them more efficient communication channels, striving for this perfect signal with no noise, have we just swapped one mystery, the soul, for another, the algorithm?
And in chasing that perfectly rational, efficient, pure state of consciousness, are we chasing something that isn't actually, well, human anymore?
That's the question, isn't it? What gets lost when the noise is completely filtered out?